Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Vivisection. This is Zane Simon of Bloody Elbow, joined by my, uh, you know, I was going to, I was going to say tardy colleague, and then I like that just went down a whole wrong path that I was like, I can't say that.
There was some word association going on there. As soon as you
Yeah,
thought about saying it.
exactly. So my ever late colleague Connor Rubish, who
You know what? I'll allow you to say Rubush today, Zane.
no Rubish Connor Rubbish, because he's trash, right, folks? Like, yeah, I know that's. I'll be all here all week. Don't
Thank
don't
God.
all,
Thank God there were no British kids in elementary school because they tried to come up with to make fun of my last name, and none of them could. They were all too stupid. But if one of them had known the word rubbish, they probably would have gone for that.
It's right there. It's just sitting right there for everybody, all and sundry. But we are here to talk about the Tough Latin America 3 finale. We are running way late because Connor fell asleep in, as he put it, a pizzeria bathroom. He was halfway through a calzone and
halfway through a calzone. It was, in case anyone was wondering, chicken, spinach, and 3 cheese. And
he was like, I have to go to the bathroom, but I don't want to leave it behind, so I'll just take it, eat it while I'm in the bathroom. He just fell asleep.
Halfway through the hand dryers.
Exactly.
What can I say? The warm air, the soothing hum. It was just couldn't resist.
Yeah. So he's running way behind, and we are here to deliver this Tough Latin America 3 finale, which is one of those cards that we'll probably spend more time than we should talking about it, because it's full of fights that I'm actually really interested in, even though they are between fighters that nobody gives half a damn about.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think it's like a lot of cards. It's maybe we're also a little more into it because we've had so much time off, and that always seems to make things feel a little more exciting. But it seems to be unfairly overshadowed by UFC 205 right now because there's not a single fight on here that doesn't seem like it would be fun.
Let's not go too far. UFC 205 is one of the best cards UFC has
ever. Yeah. I don't know if I can say unfairly. I feel sympathy for this fighters on this card that they're being overshadowed because there's a lot of things that I care about that should be really exciting. But it is fair that people should care more about UFC 205 because the card's amazing.
Yeah. But this card actually, the top of it the main card has a lot of good fighters on it that are interesting that we want to talk about. The undercard has a lot of fighters that I'm really interested in because they all present these weird little style hiccups.
Yeah.
And these like very particular types of fighters and particular types of matchups that I'm really interested to talk about. We'll try to keep it short and sweet as much as we can early, but if we don't, then apologies ahead of time. So on that note, why don't we just dive right in and talk about Enrique Barzola versus Chris Avila?
I love Enrique Barzola. I don't know if I've talked about that enough on this show. You do too, Zane?
Yes, I do too.
I have been a fan of his ever since I first had to study footage of him because it was just a pleasant treat to see someone whose style was so kind of weird, who was having success. I could see his style working, and I could see it working because of how well he understood things like distance and rhythm that a lot of young up-and-comers don't. He's a 27-year-old fighter who looks like he's over the hill, which is great. He looks like an old man. He's from Peru, which doesn't have much of an MMA scene.
It has a weird, it has more of an MMA scene than you'd expect. It's
like Alaska. It has like some steady promotions, but it's not like MMA is a huge sport in Peru.
No.
It has a really weak version of the UK MMA scene, from what I can tell. Like it's kind of underground, but it's definitely been going for a while.
Yeah, it has a couple promotions that have been going long term and go continuously.
Like 300 Sparta,
300 Sparta, and Inca FC. But it's it's better than like Argentina, for instance, which I've never heard of an MMA promotion in Argentina. I'm sure there are, but I've never even heard of them.
Argentina churns out good boxers, but not so much on the MMA fighters. Yeah, so but it's still he's kind of like it's like having the first Welsh MMA fighter in the UFC or whatever. There's MMA happening in Wales. And obviously there are nearby places where they can train, but it's still cool to have it. And he's surprisingly good despite that. And I think he's been doing some training at ATT, splitting his time there since coming to the US, which is great because his punching is getting a lot better. His boxing, his awkward movement. He's not just a guy with reactive takedowns and ground and pound anymore, although he still has that in his back pocket. So, yeah, I like him. He's weird, but his style totally makes sense. And I enjoy watching like a fairly technical outfighter do his thing, especially when he's over time going to get better and better at doing that. And he definitely is. So there is no reason to pick Chris Avila over him. Chris is just not ready. He needs a lot more time. He has the tiny pieces of a style that could very well work, but he looks like a really underdeveloped Nate Diaz. And that's because kind of he is a really underdeveloped Nate Diaz. He just needs more time in the oven. So let him lose this fight. Hopefully he's still all right after it. He goes back to the regionals, picks up some wins. I wouldn't be surprised if he was back. But at the moment, he didn't have any answers when he fought Artem Lobov. And Barzola is a more complete fighter than Lobov. So he's got more options, if maybe less power. So I got to go with Barzola El Fuerte all the way.
Yeah, I mean, part of that too. And I hate to say this because it's not, I don't know, it's not kind, but Avila's also lost a couple of the kind of regional fights that, frankly, like Nate Diaz would never have lost and has never lost. Even going back to his early loss to like Koji Oishi and Pancrase or something like that. Like, at least there you're talking about like a solid vet who matches up. Was like difficult for a really young fighter. Avila's just kind of lost to some other like young dudes kicking around the local California regional scene.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on their different backgrounds, why they might be different. Because, like, I'm pretty sure Nate was doing jiu-jitsu since he was 14 and doing, like, unlicensed Vale Tudo fights. So he had probably more experience than it seemed when he first started his career. Yeah. Avila, it seems, is maybe my guess, looking at him, is that he basically started at MMA and maybe just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's just I'm saying, like, even among prospects, like, I remember looking at Avila's tape, and even, like, as a prospect,
he doesn't
like,
blow you away, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, wait, this is not a dude who, even on the regional scene, is dominating people,
Yeah, but you can see the pieces there, and he's got a really good training camp as far as partners go, so.
Hopefully it improves, yeah.
Yeah.
But Barzola should kind of steamroll him. That's just...
I think so, too.
Avila doesn't offer nearly enough offense, and he's not confident in anything that he does. And that, that's all going to be key for a fighter like Barzola to just kind of run through him. Barzola is the favorite to probably an outlandish degree. I mean, Barzola should win this. Avila is not that good, but you're also talking about even for featherweight, undersized Peruvian MMA fighter who is still like working on getting his own experience. Avila could absolutely like pull out some submission or a surprise KO or something.
Mm-hmm.
So Barzola coming in at minus 500 to minus 625. Avila at plus 472 to plus 350. That's kind of ripe for an absurd upset. Like,
yeah, I will say though, I think perhaps the best evidence that I don't, at least for my own feelings at Avila, it doesn't stand a really good chance here, is that even looking at those numbers, I don't really feel like putting any kind of bet on him.
No, I'm not saying bet on Chris Avila. He's just, like I say, he doesn't offer enough offense.
Yeah. Both these guys are still getting some seasoning, so it doesn't really make sense to put such heavy odds on anyone at this stage in their career yet.
No, you don't want to see like kind of, I mean, like we like Barzola, but kind of generic undercard fighters at like plus or minus 500 to 600 odds. It's like, well, these guys are just Barzola's not about to go on some title run,
Mhm.
He's a fun fighter, but it is what it is. Anyway, that brings us to Marco Polo Reyes versus Jason Novelli. Now, I have a small soft spot for Jason Novelli because he's one of those fighters that actually seems reasonably technical in a lot of areas, but I feel like his game is kind of like it's that lever pulling style of fighting where it's like, here's my boxing game. Okay, I need to switch to kicking. Here's my kicking game. Okay, I need to switch to wrestling. Okay, here's my wrestling game. And because of that, he had like if he gets stuck in any one particular area, he can get really outworked by somebody who has his number there, even if they are not otherwise as well-rounded or diverse a fighter. And that's kind of what I feel like is going to happen here because Reyes is a shockingly dangerous boxer. Like he's, if Novelli's just like, okay, I can out wrestle this dude, I'm going to take him down and out grapple him, he can, I think. Novelli, Reyes is not a great counter wrestler. Novelli can come out there and get on him and try and work to out grapple him. But Novelli's not a masterfully controlling grappler. He actually has some problems keeping guys like in control. And Reyes is just so dangerous in that boxing range. He's a high output, high volume power striker who's comfortable in the pocket. He can get hit. He over engages. But I think, he's not even a bad defensive fighter. A lot of why he gets hit so much is it's the product of when you put out as much offense as he does, you are going to get hit in return. There's just no two ways about it. So I don't think Novelli has the right style to take advantage of that. He could if he sees the right opening, if he starts in the right gear, he could catch Polo Reyes, he could take him down, he could hit a flying knee in the clinch or something like that. Novelli's dynamic, he's diverse enough to make that happen, but I think I'm more willing to bet on him getting stuck in a boxing match he's not ready for against Reyes and getting knocked out.
Yeah, I do think the two things Novelli has going in his favor are that he kind of specializes, as I see it, in the two ranges that Marco Polo Reyes does not want to be in. He's a better kicker, or at least a more frequent one, and a better wrestler with a ground game. Those are the two things that Reyes doesn't want to do. He wants to be in a relatively middle range, jab range at the longest, throwing combination punches. But on the flip side, I think his biggest weakness is his boxing. And I think Reyes is on a really good path for improvement right now. He was kind of in the weeds earlier in his career. He had like a stop-start beginning. He had 3 losses in a row, one to Erick Montano, who's also fighting on this card. I think I would pick Marco Polo Reyes over Montano now. I think I would favor him in that fight. I think he's definitely improving. And I think it looks like the Alliance MMA has been really good for him. He's getting better defensively. His footwork is cleaning up. He is using his jab more. And he also seems really coachable, which is a great thing. When Erick Del Fierro demanded that he go to the body after that first round with Maestro Kim, he went to the body, and it worked brilliantly. He was listening to everything that Erick Del Fierro was having him do, and I think he seems to be visibly improving as a result. So if Novelli is anywhere near as vulnerable to a combination punching style as he looked against David Tamor, then it's kind of hard to pick him against Marco Polo Reyes, who is maybe not as experienced and crafty as Tamor, but probably a good deal more powerful. So, yeah, I'm going with Marco Reyes as well.
Yeah, I honestly feel like this. I know it's not quite the same matchup, but Novelli does feel like I feel like Reyes can approach this fight similarly to the Dong Young Kim fight. Just in that he's got Kim is also another fighter who has a lot of trouble switching gears. Not necessarily bad at anything, but really can get stuck in specific areas of the fight.
It's not great, not like fantastic,
Yeah.
although it happens that Reyes was getting stunned by Dong Hyun Kim. But it's really good that he managed to have that happen to him and fight back at an even faster pace without slowing down.
Yeah.
And still finding power shots in the third round. By that third round, because of the way Reyes fought and also by just being a good athlete and staying calm, he was fresh and Kim was dead tired. So that is a good sign for him.
And it's also like, I think too, Novelli, they talked about it in his debut as a bad decision, but like if you watched his fight with Yosdenis Cedeno, it was like Novelli spent a lot of time in a fight that was just not good for him against somebody that he had more tools than. Like, so Cedeno is the ultimate sort of, here are these three exciting things I know how to do really well, and I'm just going to spam those.
Didn't he go to draw with him?
Yeah, he went to a draw with him.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's a product of Novelli. Like, eventually he was like, oh yeah, no, I should actually start like clinch fighting this guy instead of outboxing him. And then he suddenly did way better.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the odds. Novelli is the slight underdog, plus 150 down to plus 135. Polo Reyes is 158 at minus 158 down to minus 180. And I think that's just about right.
Sure,
good,
yeah.
Close odds, slightly favoring Reyes for his power and durability and sort of and endurance.
Agreed.
That brings us to a middleweight bout between Sam Alvey and Alex Nicholson.
Despite the fact that he appears to be a jackass, I like Alex Nicholson as a fighter. I enjoy watching him fight. He's weird. Not in like the smart way that Enrique Barzola is. He's a pure brawler. He throws everything and the kitchen sink at his opponent whenever he feels like it. He takes a good shot, doesn't seem discouraged by it, and just attacks in whatever position he's put in. That's not a super reliable way to go about fighting as a style, but it does make you dangerous when people expect you to be outmatched. People will see you in a matchup and say, this guy's more technical, so he doesn't have a chance or whatever. And then a guy like Alex Nicholson will just completely catch him off guard. That happened in his last fight against, was it
Devin Clark?
Devin Clark. Where, Devin Clark definitely looked like the better fighter, but he couldn't outbrawl Alex Nicholson. He got caught in a weird little exchange. Nicholson hung around and kept looking for openings, and that is his dangerous. And then you have Sam Alvey, who is frustrating sometimes because he is so committed to counterpunching. And I don't even think for Sam Alvey it's necessarily a desire that he just wants to hang back. I think he doesn't really know how to lead that well. And I don't think anyone in his life, anyone's ever like really focused on honing that aspect of his game, or he's ever had a camp where he's been told to do that, or maybe he just feels like he doesn't feel right doing it, so he's got to stick to what he knows. But against guys who refuse to commit, or guys who fight from a range at which Alvey's best weapons are not that effective and just kind of pick them apart with kicks and long punches and then get out, Alvey is very frustrating because he can't find the opening for the right hook, the left uppercut, the left straight, his really good counter punches. But when someone's kind of wild and lunging in, really dangerous knockout puncher. And so we have a battle between a really tough chin on a guy who will crazily throw everything as long as he's able, and a guy who is really good at cracking chins when they don't defend themselves properly. I'm going to pick Sam Alvey. More experience, more precision, and more direction in his game. But, Alex Nicholson has never been knocked out. He's fought heavyweights and not been knocked out. So picking Sam Alvey by knockout, which I am, would be – there's a chanciness to that. Alex Nicholson might surprise him by just being so tough that he's able to change the color of the fight even after eating the counters that I'm sure he will eat. So it's Sam Alvey by TKO for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is the thing where it is like looking at this fight to me, it is a stylistic layup for Sam Alvey, where like it just really fits perfectly his game and what he needs out of an opponent. Somebody that's going to come after him and probably has zero care about Sam Alvey's style or his way of fighting or his power or his reputation or anything like that. I don't think Nicholson is going to give a damn or change a thing to approach that. Nothing about him has suggested a thoughtful, considerate, cautious approach from Nicholson.
Right.
And that plays perfectly into what Sam Alvey wants to do. That said, it's not like Alvey hasn't lost to some really mediocre fighters before. Like,
what are you saying about Tom Watson's name?
Or Brandon Ropati? I mean, like,
yeah, I don't know who that is.
Exactly. Like, they're just some dudes that have beat him because he is so particular in his dimension of offense. But there aren't enough tools in Nicholson's toolbox to make me think that he beats Alvey here, unless he just lands some crazy spinning back fist and KOs him. If he doesn't KO him, I think Alvey should win it. So, yeah, I'm taking Alvey here, I think, by KO as well. Nicholson's chin is tough, but it's not like he hasn't been hurt before. He usually survives. So, odds on that fight, Sam Alvey is the favorite, minus 196 to minus 250. Nicholson, the underdog, plus 197 to plus 170. And I think those are honestly a bit close, frankly. I haven't seen a lot out of Nicholson's game beyond the ability to get a surprise KO that would suggest to me that he's winning rounds.
Yeah, but against Sam, I mean, it feels okay to me. It's it's so hard to just know what Sam Alvey fight's gonna look like. So
it's true. Sam Alvey, he does have the problem that he's so counter-based that even when he has clear opportunities and openings that are not based off a counter, he won't take them, which is frustrating as hell to watch. So, that brings us to the FS1 card, the remainder of which will be on FS1, but the FS1 prelim opener, Henry Briones versus Douglas Silva de Andrade, Douglas D. Silva. And this is a weird fight because I'm really, like, Douglas De Silva is one of those fighters that, or D. Silva is one of those fighters that I'm, like, really excited about for no good reason, sort of in the same vein as an Enrique Barzola.
Well, I was actually in my head just thinking he reminds me with his weird stiff style of Sergio Moraes, who I know you have a great fondness for. And I was thinking, before you even said it, I was like, I bet Zane really likes Douglas De Silva.
He's pretty much, and part of that is he's pretty much entirely self-taught, or was for years, like dirt poor, working out in his backyard, learning MMA. And he's also very obviously an insanely gifted athlete, which is this really weird combo in the cage because he's got this very herky-jerky Enrique Barzola, Keith Jardine-esque, Sergio Moraes-like style where you're just like, this guy's so funky. But he combines that with also being like a way, way better athlete than any of them, which he's not going to fight to his strengths, but he has the ability to land with the kind of power or do the kind of acrobatic things and move with the kind of speed that would make for an elite athlete were he to put more technique together. And he's fighting a guy, Henry Briones, who's just kind of stupid tough and surprisingly skilled in a way that's not so much like, he's going to overwhelm you with his skill, but it's that he's so tough that when he doesn't go away, he's got enough skill to make the fight really difficult on opponents. We saw that even with Cody Garbrandt, where it's like at no point did he really present any offense to really like make it a fight. He didn't make, he didn't hurt Cody Garbrandt. He didn't put Cody Garbrandt on the defensive, but he was tough enough that Cody Garbrandt couldn't hurt him easily, and then offered just enough offense the whole time to make Cody Garbrandt actually have to be careful and cautious and not just.
He remains the only guy in the UFC that has made Cody Garbrandt go the distance. Pretty much everyone else has been flattened in the first round. Henry Briones has the unlikely distinction of making Cody Garbrandt work for 15 minutes, and he did make him. Like you said, he didn't hurt him or anything. Cody had all the big moments, and that may be a big problem for Briones, that tends to happen to him. But he was stinging Garbrandt for 3 rounds. He kept his jab on him.
Against a worst fighter like Guido Canetti, like he got hurt a few times, but he got hit a few times, but he didn't go away. And when he was landing his offense, when he was forcing the fight, he was able to turn that durability around to hurting Guido Canetti and taking Guido Canetti out of his element and eventually finishing him.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes this fight really hard to pick because you basically have an insane athlete with very few consistent technical tools and a really poor athlete who's durable and has enough technique to make a fight a really tough scrap. And I'm going to lean Douglas Da Silva because I want to see him do well and I want to see him show improvement and I want to see him take advantage of that athleticism. But if he can't, there's no reason not to pick Henry Briones here to not go away and then to surprise Da Silva and, hit him enough, eventually hurt him just by being around and being able to land clean shots as the fight goes on.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me to call too. Da Silva is by far more powerful. I don't think he's quite at the Cody Garbrandt level of knockout ability, but he's definitely the harder puncher and kicker of these two. He's got a really powerful kicking game. He's got decent timing when his opponent is reckless. We saw that with his counter right hand in the Cody Gibson fight. But I don't see Enrique Briones doing what a guy like Cody Gibson did. And I do think that Da Silva's career seems to have largely been built on pretty underwhelming competition. Like he has a really impressive looking record, but not a ton of really meaningful names on there. And so he gets to the UFC, fights Zubaira Tukhugov, and he loses convincingly. And then he kind of has a close fight with Cody Gibson. Wasn't really close, but you kind of also expect someone really on a prospect path to destroy a guy like Cody Gibson. Maybe that's putting too much stock into one matchup, but I would say that I found Henry Briones' loss to Cody Garbrandt more impressive to me than Da Silva's win over Gibson. It just said more about what kind of level of competition I think he's suited for, even if he never really came close to winning that fight. Now, the thing is because Da Silva's the bigger puncher, and Briones has a few split decisions on his record, he has often struggled, I think, to put his stamp on a fight against someone, because he's not a huge puncher. He's got some knockouts. He's a good submission grappler, but not an amazing takedown artist. And he just doesn't have that athleticism like a guy like Da Silva has to suddenly change a fight or to really steal around with a single move. Not that dynamic. So I'm going to pick Briones for his consistency. But Da Silva lands like one good shot in 2 of the rounds. It could very well be good enough to steal him the fight. So it's a tough one.
It is. It's a good matchup. Like it's exactly the kind of fight I want to see.
Yeah.
The odds on this fight, Da Silva is at -155 to -175. Briones at +143 to +125. Not saying that Briones is worth a bet, but it is also worth noting that Douglas is coming off of like 2 years of not fighting nearly. He has not been in the cage in a while, I don't think. Let me see. Is it actually 2 years or is it just...
I'm not sure it's been that long.
It's been a while. It's been one of those things where I keep looking, I'm like, when is this dude going to fight again? Cody Gibson fight was February of 2015, so
Oh,
it has been almost 2 years.
year and a half, yeah, at least, yeah. Yeah, well, Briones has
So
been out a while too, though.
true.
I think he bought back
Briones
like a
has
year
not
ago.
been. Neither guy's been that active, so it's also that makes it that much tougher because anytime you got a guy coming off a long layoff, sometimes they're improved, sometimes they're exactly the same, and sometimes they are rusty as hell.
Yeah, I do like Briones as an underdog bet, though, as a small underdog bet, because I think he's just got that very consistent. He's got a kind of a gamer spoiler kind of style where he's gonna.
He's really hard to hurt, and because he's really hard to hurt, a fighter like Silva, who's maybe prone to like fading as the fight goes on,
Mm-hmm,
could end up like dominating early and then losing late.
mm-hmm.
Uh, that brings us to the let's see what's next. I'm trying to shuffle things. That brings us to a welterweight bout: Erick Montano versus Max Griffin.
Two guys that I find to be frustrating. I think I've probably been a little too hard on Erick Montano in the past, but he showed some good abilities and he showed his grit and his toughness, which I think, like his brother, are his best qualities. In that fight with Randy Brown, he really came very close to winning that fight before giving up a submission in the third. And he was scrappy. He doesn't seem to be really very good anywhere, but he's kind of like the opposite of Jason Novelli, who's pretty good everywhere, but struggles to change between them. Erick Montano is not very good anywhere, but he puts a lot of effort and heart into whatever phase he's in, and it really kind of belies the level of skill he actually possesses. He can scrap like crazy. He will go for strongman takedowns just to get you on the ground and change the fight. And he has a decent submission game to capitalize on the scrambles. So scrappy is a good quality. It's a good quality that a lot of fighters don't have, and it's a tough one to teach. Max Griffin is also scrappy, but also frustrating to me. He is like the John Dodson style fighter where he's like really athletic and powerful, and then the rest of his game seems lacking. His first fight in the UFC, granted, against Colby Covington, which is a fight he was pretty much guaranteed to lose.
Yeah.
Covington is a nightmare matchup for basically anybody who's not like top 25 in the division, just because of the relentlessness of which, he knows exactly how he wants to beat you. And he even got to like play around and have some fun with the striking first. He's like, well, I'm going to take Max Griffin down. I may as well try
which was a terrible mistake, but it worked out okay for him because he basically just gave Max Griffin the only chances he could get to possibly win.
Yeah, he basically looked like he wanted to get in some work on his striking because he knew he was going to out-wrestle Max Griffin, and lo and behold, he did. So Max Griffin, though, that's kind of how I expected a guy like Mike Perry to look coming into the UFC. Like, very powerful, not very well developed, good athlete, but that's basically all he has going. And so we have like a hard, quick puncher with not a ton else in his game versus a scrappy guy who's not really very good at anything. It's a tough fight to pick. I'm going to go with Griffin. Because I guess I just have some kind of grudge against Erick Montano.
You have a grudge against both the Montanos. I think
you know exactly why I have a grudge against Big Brother Montano.
Yeah, and I think that's trickled down to his little brother.
Yeah, it's unfair. It's unfair. Erick Montano has not really been in any fights that are terrible. And most of Augusto's fights are good too. Most of them are really fun and scrappy. But that one fight, man, that Cahal Pendred fight, can't forgive him. I'm going to pick Max Griffin because I like his speed and his explosiveness to beat a guy like Erick Montano, who I think is kind of slow-footed, kind of obvious when he attacks. But it's definitely the kind of fight where if Griffin tires after the first round, if he hasn't fixed some of the problems he had going into his last fight, then Montano is still going to be there. And he's still going to be throwing volume and still going for takedowns and still just pushing every advantage he can possibly find. So I'm going to say Max Griffin gets those big moments early, but, like I said, scrappiness is a good quality to have.
Yeah, it's tough. This is another tough one. I agree. Griffin, He really you can tell that he's somebody who has had enough power that they just don't have to fix any problems in their game
Right,
for a long
exactly.
time. And now he's suddenly getting to a level where people are like, no, actually, I can just take you down whenever I want and keep you there. Because in the past, you've seen him get taken down and he'll just get back up. He can just strongman his way out off the bottom and explode out because he's a good enough athlete. But he can't do that at this level anymore. He might be able to do that here. That could be his saving grace because Montano will go for takedowns, and Griffin's takedown game is takedown defense is very first level and probably not good enough that he will stay up. But he just hits so hard. Like that's the thing is that he hits hard enough that in a fight like this, I feel like I have to pick him because Montano's not a sure finisher, you know? He's a guy who's basically just going to try and brawl it out with you for 15 minutes. And in doing so, submission, he's submitted a few guys on the Mexican regional scene, but he also tends to get finished when he can't get a submission, which I don't think that Max Griffin will possibly do at all. But I think that I think that Griffin, Montano just doesn't have enough control on the ground, and I think that that's going to give Griffin enough opportunity to hurt him standing. He might not. There's no reason Montano can't win. It should basically be a toss-up fight, but I'm leaning towards Griffin just a little. The big thing I was going to say in there too about Mike Perry is the big difference between somebody like Mike Perry and Max Griffin is that Perry has a very few things that he does pretty fundamentally well, and he sticks to doing only those, and that makes him really dangerous.
I think he also does seem to be a better athlete even than Max Griffin. I think he's got it down. His timing, his sense of distance, and his power, his explosiveness, all of those are really, really...
They're good, and it's just, he doesn't put himself in positions to lose. He doesn't take himself out of the fight he wants to have, which...
Yeah.
It's a big skill to have. It's something that Griffin does not have. Griffin is constantly charging in, throwing awkward single punches from way outside, and then trying to dive into something weird and wild, and just does all sorts of crazy stuff.
He doesn't have the control that Perry has.
Yeah. The odds in this fight, Griffin is minus 150 to minus 165. Montano plus 143 to plus 120. I'm going to go ahead and say that's actually a little wide. I would not bet on Montano because this fight is just probably going to be a sloppy mess, and anything can happen in that kind of fight. Like I expect both these guys to be pretty relentlessly aggressive, especially Montano. I expect him to just go after Griffin the whole time. And that should just mean, don't bet on it, but this is the kind of fight that should be plus or minus 100, dead even, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
That brings us to Marco Beltran versus Joe Soto. And Joe Soto, I think Joe Soto's entire UFC career, outside of his one moment where he got to fight TJ Dillashaw, Joe Soto's entire UFC career can be made up of fights that he should win but probably won't. And this kind of feels like the next one of those. Like Chris Beal, that fight was going way against him before Beal just fell off entirely. Beal, I think, was trying to adjust his style too much. Beal was fighting like Joe Soto could not possibly win that fight. And then he eventually,
Chris Beal was fighting like Chris Beal.
He got so wild and aggressive and unconcerned with defense that eventually was like, you can't you can't do that for that long without getting hurt. You just can't. Beltran is really, like, I was really impressed with the way his game was developing in his last bout. He can still be taken down, but he's going, he's getting more comfortable with getting up when he gets taken down, and he's getting a lot better about keeping distance and really staying with his range game where he's best, where his creativity can shine. That's a big advantage he's going to have over Joe Soto, who Joe Soto is like, he's got all the right skills to be a good fighter, and then he's now just fighting against natural, he's fighting against nature, which is being a really undersized guy who maybe does not have the world's greatest chin. Like, man, that's a hard row to hoe as a fighter. Like, I'm going to be, he's kind of a, what's his name? Who's the big-headed striking lightweight from Canada?
I don't know.
Who loses all his fights? Like, he fought. Oh God, my mind is going completely blank now. He fought.
I really want to know now. John McDessie?
McDessie, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, he's like John McDessie with a well-rounded skill set.
Big-headed striker from Canada.
But that's the.
I mean, the description got me there in the end, so it's not bad.
Joe Soto, he's working on the same kind of scale, where it's just like, you are always going to be the undersized guy in your division, and you just have to make that work by being well-rounded and aggressive and staying with it. And he can do that. Like, Montano, he gives up takedowns. He can be out-grappled. He can be outworked. But especially with late notice, I don't know. Or not Montano, but
Beltran.
Beltran can be outworked. He gives up takedowns. But I think he's going to be too dangerous outside, and Joe Soto's coming in on short notice is going to end up falling short in a good hard scrap.
Personally, I think Joe Soto's biggest problem may not be that he doesn't seem to be all that durable, which I don't think he is, although he looked okay in the Chris Beal fight. Beal's a pretty powerful dude. He got hit a lot, looked all right. I think it's maybe that he's kind of one of those fighters, like a Jorge Masvidal or Sean Strickland or a Gegard Mousasi, until recently, who has made the change, who struggles to take a fight from his opponent. He's pretty good at not being there to be hit, and that's why he lost the Missionary Tanaka fight. It was close. Most people thought he won, but he didn't do anything to put a stamp on it. Yep. He allowed it to be very close. When at times, especially later in the fight, when Tanaka was slowing down, it seemed like he should have been able to. Likewise, in I guess the Bierchek fight, it was just him getting overwhelmed. But likewise in the Beal fight, which he did win, but it was kind of like he pressured really well in the second round. He had that veteran savvy to just think, all right, you know what? It doesn't have to be pretty. I'm going to get hit. I'm going to go after him and see how he reacts. And it worked really well. And then he couldn't make himself do it again in the third round. It's like he can't find that consistent approach where he just makes his opponent lose. He's much better, I think, at surviving, Mm-hmm. But I think that kind of fighter often does well in short notice fights. His best performance still in the UFC is that fight with TJ Dillashaw. Didn't really even win a round, but looking at it in context, guy switches to 1 day's notice. He did unreasonably well against TJ Dillashaw. Really made Dillashaw work to beat him and put his own offense out there at the same time. He's basically a spoiler more than he is a contender. And I think that may favor him here against Beltran. This time Soto has not been at a camp. Beltran has. That's a big advantage for him. But Soto doesn't tend to go nuts throwing everything out there. He tends to be a pretty measured fighter. And I just think Beltran's game is like a much, much worse version of what Chris Beal tried to do to Soto, He's kind of an outfighter, but he doesn't really know how to throw combinations. Not that well. He gets backed up into the fence a lot more easily. He can't do what Chris Beal was doing to make Joe Soto look so bad by moving and popping his jab and keeping him at range.
I also think he's less likely to do the kind of terrible, horrible mistakes that Chris Beal makes that allowed Joe Soto to take over that fight.
Sure, yeah. And he's probably not going to tire out, like Chris Beal definitely did. He makes different kinds of mistakes, but he's not going to get crazy and lose his head like Beal did. So it really depends where Soto's fitness is at. But I'm going to pick him. I think he's going to win a unanimous decision, possibly fade late. But I just think that Beltran also is, when he does get aggressive, is a little too wild, and is better when he's fighting from the outside, but doesn't really do it with that much depth. So it could go either way, but I'm going with Joe Soto.
Yeah, I was really pretty impressed with how Beltran looked last time out, and I think that if he can keep on that same track of improvement, of improving his footwork, of sharpening his striking, then unlike a lot of the guys that Joe Soto has fought recently, although more like Beal perhaps, he is going to do a good job maintaining range, where Joe Soto just does not have enough tools.
Yeah. The wrestling was still bad, though, man. That's a thing that Beltran desperately needs to fix.
That's very true. The wrestling is still not there. And
if Reginaldo Vieira can take you down several times, I'm pretty sure Joe Soto can. He's actually a pretty solid wrestler.
He is. He's a very good fighter everywhere. Like I say, I have this sneaking feeling about Joe Soto that, I mean, he's kind of a quadruple A fighter. Like, that's the thing where it's just like, man, you're really good, and you just may not win enough at this level to stay there.
He's like the definition of a quadruple A fighter. He did really pretty well in Bellator and other regional promotions. You give him a small pond, he's really solid. Yeah, Tachi Palace. You put him with the other good fighters, and he's really, really unreliable.
Yep. So, but you're right. Beltran would probably be, well, I don't know. Anthony Burchak, I have different feelings about that. And Eddie Yagan. I was going to say Beltran would be the worst fighter he's lost to, but it would actually be, I don't know, somewhere right in there.
Burchak on a good day is at least very dangerous. Anybody could lose to Burchak on a good day.
And
I don't think Eddie Yagan's a bad fighter. He was okay back when Soto lost to him.
He was. It's just, I don't know. We'll see. But I think Beltran's improving. That's the big thing for me.
Yeah, and Soto probably is not. He's probably done.
Yep. That brings us to the odds on that fight. Joe Soto is a small favorite, -115 to -130. Beltran +108 down to -115. I don't know what to even think about this fight. Like, on this kind of short notice, and as unreliable as Joe Soto can be, as a favorite, like, that just to me is like, I don't see any way to bet on this fight,
Yeah. Yeah, me neither. I thought maybe looking at the props, you might find like the duration, like over 2.5, under 2.5. But over is -125, under is +105. I think, like, knowing Soto, he could get knocked out. Knowing Beltran, he probably won't knock Soto out. There's no value there. So
yeah,
just don't bet on it.
Just don't bet on it. That brings us to the final prelim, Erick Perez versus Felipe Arantes. And
excuse me while I yawn. That is not a reflection of the quality of the fight.
No.
This is a really good fight. This one should be a blast. Erick Perez is like what I said about Eric Montano to the 10th degree. He's so scrappy. And unlike Montano, he is getting technically better and understanding his game more and more with time. He is the only fighter out of Alliance, and I have to apologize or at least redact some of what I've said about Alliance, because I think they've really shown an ability to produce good prospects lately that I wasn't seeing before. All I saw was,
for the bulk of his early career, he was with Jackson Wing.
Yeah, and now he's with Alliance, and it seems to be doing good for him,
Yep.
Yeah, early on, I was seeing Alliance as the guys who messed up Phil Davis and messed up like Norman Park and turn these guys into these really static outfighters. Either they've changed something or they just, yeah, right. Either they've changed something or they just weren't getting the right kind of fighters for what they were trying to do. But a guy like Erick Perez, a guy like Marco Polo Reyes, guys like Jeremy Stevens have all shown really good improvements since going to Alliance. They've all shown, some of them like Perez and Stevens, late career improvements. And Perez is the one guy who is actually kind of picking up the Dominic Cruz approach. He's using that weird, bouncy, jittery footwork with this erratic head movement. And it's not flawless for him. It's not beautiful like Dominic Cruz is not yet, if ever. But it's, it makes him kind of hard to deal with because he's a guy who is happy to wade in or walk you around, whatever, as long as he is finding a way to hit you. And if you hit him, he fights back really hard. And he will go just like Montano, but much better. He'll go for the takedowns. He'll work ground and pound. He'll look for submissions, and he will strike with you on the feet. Wherever he sees an opening, Erick Perez will press that advantage. He will press the advantage wherever he finds it. Felipe Arantes is kind of the same, except with one huge glaring flaw, which is that he is so willing to fight off of his back. That is his big problem. Without that, he's really solid. He gave a tough fight to alpha male guy with ear gauges and pizza love.
Oh, yeah.
Feely.
Andre Feely.
Yeah. He gave a tough fight to Andre Feely. He's had some solid wins. He's a good striker, aggressive, powerful, a little over-aggressive sometimes. He gives up those takedowns. Takedown defense is not there for him. And that wouldn't be such a huge problem if his scrambling was better. But it's not. Or at least he doesn't have any urgency to scramble. He probably knows how. Excuse me one second. Someone whacking weeds outside. I'm sure he knows how, but he just thinks somebody takes him down. He's like, all right, I'm going to win the fight from here. So, and you've got a cricket under your desk.
Yeah, with my timer going to tell us to hurry up, but go for it.
Okay, well, so I think I got to go with Erick Perez. He's more capable everywhere, more knowledgeable about how to win a fight. I think he's more coachable. We had definitely seen that both through Del Fiero's corner advice and the improvements he's made in the short time he's been at Alliance. So I got to go with Erick Perez by decision.
Yeah, I think the big thing too for me with Arantes is that, like, we were talking about this before, but talking about the idea of like fighters who don't keep their range. Like Arantes does not keep anything.
Yes,
he does not keep any part of the fight where it might be advantageous to him. If he's striking from outside, he will walk himself straight into the clinch. If he's in the clinch, he will let
flying knee into the fence will be the third strike he throws if he has a clear advantage from range.
Yeah, and if he's in the clinch, he will let himself get taken down right away. And if he's and if he's in control on the ground, he will give up control on the ground to go for a submission. Like, there's just no keeping anything for him. There's no patience to his game.
There's no metagame there. There's no strategy to it.
And I'm not heartened in the idea that might change anytime soon by recent comments from him saying, I don't even know who Erick Perez is, and I have done no study, and I'm not going to take any interest in how he fights.
I sure hope that's just smack talk.
It is not. I just about guarantee it. He basically said, I never take any interest in how my opponents fight, and I just fight my game, and my game is good enough. Erick Perez is not going to do what Gerard Sanders did, which is just hang out on top of Felipe Arantes waiting for an armbar for 5 minutes. And if Perez is there, he's going to work him over. He's going to work for back control because he loves back control. And this is the right fight for Erick Perez. Erick Perez has not improved in the ways that we expected Erick Perez to improve when he came out as like a 22-year-old out of Jackson Wink in the UFC. And everybody's like, oh, this is going to be the future of the first Mexican star in the UFC. He's going to get so much better. And instead, like, he's just kind of patiently improved without these huge leaps. But yeah, I like what Alliance is doing. I think that they're at least giving some urgency to his game that Jackson Wink
Mm-hmm.
could not apply.
Right. I think if you're going to compare the two, like until at least Brandon Gibson arrived, which I think Perez left just before that, he really had a big influence there. If you were to compare the two, you would say Alliance definitely will teach you better boxing, better combination punching, and that's what Perez needed. That's what he was lacking.
He really did. And so I think that he's really finding a groove, and Arantes just seems to be floating around as the same, better than 50% of his division fighter. Like, Arantes is the prototypical action fighter in that you give him the right matchup, he will win. You give him the wrong matchup, he will lose. It will always be fun, and he will never make headway because of it.
Yeah, I'm encouraged too. Actually, looking at Perez's Wikipedia, I kind of had him in my head as he feels like a disappointment on some huge level because there was so much hype around him coming up. And I was thinking to myself just now, well, it's all right. He ended up being a decent fighter, and we put too much expectation on him. But he's basically at the stage in his career now, as far as experience, where Edson Barboza is. He's finally coming into his prime. And unlike Barboza, I didn't know this, he's still only 26. Yep. So he probably still has a few more years to keep improving his game in the way it has been lately. And if he
if nothing else, he should be good for another 4 or 5 years before falling off.
At least he should be able to go for another 1 or 2 years of serious improvement and then maybe maintain for a few more years after that.
All right, so the odds on this fight, Perez is the favorite, -181 to -227. Arantes is the underdog, +175 down to +150. I don't know that I see a lot of value there. Maybe a little close on Perez, but Arantes is at least like dangerous enough to, Perez being a reasonable favorite is exactly what he should be.
Yeah.
That brings us to Alexa Grasso versus Heather Jo Clark. I will say this. Heather Clark is better than she gets credit for or will get credit for, and is improved more than people think she has. She's sharpened her striking to the point that she is a good, diverse action fighter who will press people in ways they don't expect. She's a fast starter, and she can turn that early into unexpected urgency out of her opponent, where she'll just come out with a big overhand and then go straight into the clinch, work knees, and try and throw you to the ground. The thing is that she's still not a great athlete, and working in the kind of way she does and the kind of pace she does ends up being exhausting, I think. Like, she just, you can't, like, that's unfortunately part of one of the things about, like, the differences in athleticism and the sort of secret bonus of being a great athlete is that you can fight excellently and hard, longer and better. Whereas somebody who's not a great athlete, even if they have all that perfect technique, even if they're the most technical fighter in the world, even if they know how to do all these things at a high level, a lot of times doing it just tires them out. Like, it wears you out because it takes so much effort to maintain. And I kind of feel like that may be a little where Heather Clark is compared to Grasso, where, like, Grasso can fight the way she wants to fight for as long as she wants to fight. She can keep a high output, diverse combination kickboxing game going. She's got reasonably decent takedown defense, and if you take her down, she's quick enough and explosive enough to get back to her feet quickly and turn that back into offense. And Heather Clark just doesn't have the control to exert to take over Grasso. She might be able to jump. The lucky thing for her would be if she could just backpack Grasso and get a rear naked choke before Grasso knows what's happening. But without that, I don't see her, over the stretch of 15 minutes, I think it will look at best like Kowalkiewicz versus Rose Namajunas, and probably not to that, but to a greater degree. Like, Grasso's not as good as Kowalkiewicz in her. Oh, maybe she is. I mean, honestly, she might be as good as Kowalkiewicz, frankly. And Heather Clark is not as athletic and dynamic as Rose Namajunas.
No.
So I see Grasso just kind of slowly piecing her up as she solves Clark's offense or forces Clark to tire from trying to work it.
Yeah, it feels like a really obvious pick for Grasso to me. And now BE poster Alejandro Castellanos Jaramillo has me worried because of the altitude of Mexico City. But, I honestly don't see Grasso's as the kind of game that really falls apart under that kind of altitude elevation. I know that pisses some pedants off. It's elevation, not altitude. But it affects everybody. And I don't think Grasso has done the bulk of her training at altitude. I think she's been in Mexico City for maybe half her camp, which is better than nothing. But also, she's a really measured fighter. To give her credit, doesn't put a lot into anything, and not in a bad way. She very effortlessly sits down on a right hand or a jab or a left hook or a kick. Everything's really kind of easy and flowy, and it still has good snap to it because her technique is really solid. So she doesn't strike me as the kind of fighter who relies on that athletic ability the same way maybe Heather Jo Clark does. To get her power, Heather Jo Clark needs a lot more explosion, I think. Needs to kind of throw herself into things, whether it's a takedown or a strike or a scramble. I think she relies more on kind of pushing her muscles to make that thing happen.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe the altitude could end up helping Alexa Grasso. Heather Jo Clark doesn't throw a lot of volume, but she seems like the fighter who's more likely to gas out to me, unless Grasso comes in really overconfident and tries to blow through her. And I don't see her doing that. So I think Grasso's going to piece her up. Really, I think she's going to outbox her pretty easily and kick her at range. And if Clark does get a takedown, which I don't think is super likely, I don't think she's even necessarily as good a wrestler as like Mizuki Inoue.
She tends to default to head and arm throws because she can't get the leg drive.
Yeah. But if she does get Grasso down, Grasso's really, really aggressive off of her back and also becoming better and better with time at scrambling back to her feet. She's got a very kind of bouncy takedown defense where her hip hits the ground and suddenly she's standing back up again. Doesn't really matter that you got her down in the first place. And when she is on the ground, as we saw in the Inoue fight, it's like submission after submission. She's as aggressive as you need to be to fight off of your back when she chooses to do so. So Grasso has a huge amount of potential. Hopefully the altitude doesn't make me look like a jackass, but I think she's got this one in the bag.
Yeah, I don't think the altitude is going to hurt her to any greater degree than it'll hurt Heather Clark. Like I say, I think Heather Clark she's got a style that's much more prone to slowing as she goes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see the odds on this fight. Clark is plus 443 to plus 350 or 315 actually. Grasso minus 425 to minus 625. That does not surprise me at all. I'm not saying Heather Clark can't win this. If you want to spend a nickel on wide odds, then go for it. But there's a reason Grasso is the favorite, and it's because she is much more technical and much more athletic. And that usually... I
don't see any reason to think that Heather Jo Clark is more likely to win than like Jodie Esquibel or Mizuki Inoue.
Yeah.
I think both of them may be a little better than her. So, yeah, it's
the odds. I don't have any problem with the odds, frankly.
Grasso all day.
Yeah. That brings us to a lightweight bout. Beneil Dariush versus Rashid Magomedov.
I love Rashid Magomedov. Big fan. I know he frustrates some people, and I totally understand it. He doesn't have killer instinct, and no, he doesn't. But I love the fact that he accidentally knocks somebody down every single time he fights. He's just like, his placement is so good. His timing is so good. And his form is really nice that he just kind of touches you with something and you go down because it's just perfect. When he counters you, lands that right hand or a left head kick, he tends to hurt someone. I think he has hurt his opponent in every single one of his UFC fights. And that's great. The problem is that he doesn't go after them when that happens. He was very, very cautious against Gilbert Burns after having him on Queer Street throughout the second round. He was really badly hurt. And Magomedov came out in the third round and just kind of casually beat him, which, I think it's fine. I understand why he doesn't. I think he wants his opponents to make mistakes and doesn't want to make mistakes himself. I get it.
He's Sam Alvey 5.0.
Yeah, he's not like cautious necessarily to a fault. In fact, he's very good at picking away and scoring shots from the outside. I don't know if it's quite like Sam Alvey. Sam Alvey will definitely go for the kill if he has you hurt.
True.
Magomedov won't. He'll have you hurt and won't go for the finish. I'm trying to think of a good comparison for him. It's tough. But he's just so patient and methodical. Like, he doesn't seem to always think of fighting like fighting. He seems to think of it like any number of sports where he's in there to score his points and win. And the fact that he does that while usually tending to hurt people, I just think speaks to his effectiveness as a fighter. But that could be a big drawback against Beneil Dariush. It makes this fight one of the hardest ones to pick for me because Dariush his natural inclination, I think, is kind of to fight at the same range as Magomedov, working behind his jab, kicking, long-range game. But with Rafael Cordeiro in his corner and training alongside guys like Rafael dos Anjos and others, he knows how to get aggressive. He is willing to just charge forward if he knows that it gives him an advantage and pile on the pressure. And that could be a problem for Magomedov because Dariush is a pretty good athlete. He's very well-rounded. He's pretty powerful. And he is willing to get aggressive, and more so than Magomedov ever is. So, and then you also have to consider, I guess you have to consider Dariush's ground game. Not that I'm trying to knock it, but Magomedov is very difficult to take down. So I would be surprised if Dariush could get him to the point where he could dominate him on the ground. But it is something that he can threaten, at the very least, to make the rest of his game more effective. And so I struggle to see the defense there for Beneil Dariush. I think he's pretty hittable, and I don't think he's all that durable either. And Magomedov, I think, definitely has his number in both of those categories. Dariush can get aggressive, but I think after the first round, that's going to get riskier and riskier as he's exposing himself to the counter game of Magomedov. And then Magomedov is very difficult to beat if Dariush does choose to stay at long range. It might make the fight more even for both guys, but Magomedov's got a really great dexterous left leg. He's got a good jab. Control of distance is pretty superb. So I'm going with Magomedov by decision, but I don't know. I don't know how he looks after an injury too. He's been out for a while now, so we'll see.
True. I think the big thing for me that has pushed me in the corner of Magomedov is that I don't think Dariush can strike. I think Dariush as a striker really wants and will maintain the idea of being aggressive and leading. He does not want empty space. If you give him time and space, Dariush will lead in it. And I think, frankly, that's where Magomedov, that's exactly what he keeps waiting for in all of these fights, is for somebody to keep leading against him. The more somebody leads, the better he does. It's when guys just are like, and if you just sit there and wait for him, and don't throw, then he'll just point you with jabs and teeps and leg kicks until you are forced to lead. Mm-hmm. But, that's kind of the thing, is that Magomedov, that's what makes him tough to beat, is you can't really afford to lead against him, but if you don't, then you just get picked at. And I think that's going to be where Dariush finds himself eventually. He's a better striker than much of the lightweight division, frankly, Dariush. Mm-hmm. He's better than 50% of it, but he's not so much better that he can be a hands-alone striker. Like, he can just be a kickboxer. I don't think he can compete at that elite level, even with his win over Michael Johnson, which I actually have very little problem with.
There was the James Vick win. It really made him seem very dangerous, though.
Yeah, that was much more of a finally exposing the idea that at an elite level, James Vick just does not present any challenge beyond eye pokes.
The fight made me feel bad for saying, when is James Vick going to fight someone who's not an undefeated prospect? Like, he just needs to fight them and no one else for the rest of his career. Because
to me, any fighter like that, though, they need to know. Like, you need to know. You need to take that step up and say, okay, am I actually the badass that I think I am?
He got absolutely thrashed, and I just thought the whole time, I'm like, I asked for this. I made this happen.
I was happy to see it. I mean,
it was very impressive.
I don't even have the dislike for James Vick that people have for him being cornered by what's his name,
Lloyd Irvin.
Yeah, Lloyd Irvin, because it's like, well, fuck, I mean, he didn't rape some girl. It's not on him.
Yeah, Lloyd Irvin's got a powerful charisma to him that is hard to understand. I don't blame people for sticking with him because he's a great deceiver. James Vick seems like a fine guy.
Yeah, James Vick, I have no problem with James Vick, but I want to see prospects. Like, I want to see them take steps up. I want to see them find out what they can and can't do.
Well, now we know. Now he can go back to prospect killing.
Yeah, well, or now he can go back to the gym and say, wow, I really have some stuff to work on and I'll improve, Like, that's, I think, the other side to it. But, yeah, I don't know that it's, like, that fight, like, Beneil Dariush was also, just rushing Vic with some abandon because he could see that Vic could not handle that pressure. And I think that Magomedov absolutely can handle that pressure and will make good use of it. So I got to pick Rashid Magomedov by decision because you don't want to pick Rashid Magomedov to finish a fight.
It's good, though. This is like the chance I've been waiting for Magomedov, that he gets an opportunity to put himself in the top 10 by beating a guy like Dariush, Yeah. It's a chance also to be impressive in a fight, to really show that he belongs among the top 10, that he's dangerous. So yeah. I'm hoping for good things.
I really don't think Dariush will want to go through any length of this fight without being aggressive, whether it's trying for takedowns or whether it's trying to strike. It's just is not the way he fights. He's very much a pressure fighter. So, odds here, Rashid Magomedov is the favorite, minus 132 to minus 175. Beneil Dariush plus 138 to plus 115. Question is, do you think Dariush is worth an underdog bet because Magomedov is so willing to drift through fights?
I don't really think this is a bettable fight at all. The odds are so close.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. That brings us to a lightweight bout. The tough finale, Martín Bravo, Claudio Puelles. Is this me? This is me.
Yeah, I think so.
On paper, there are two big factors here that I'm trying to deal with that make this fight tough. I actually like the fight. I like the matchup. Mm-hmm. Bravo is much more ready to win UFC fights right now. Mm-hmm. He is tough. He is aggressive. He will take the fight anywhere and everywhere, and he will stay aggressive throughout. He fights hard, and he fights that way all the time, no matter where he is. Puelles is sort of a default kicker who has got a grappling game off his back and otherwise does not exert a great amount of control anywhere else. He's a fantastic athlete, though. So Bravo's the guy I would pick easily, straightforward, from the hip, watching tape on them. The big problem is that he's fought as low as 135, and he is 3 inches shorter than Puelles, who is a better athlete. Being smaller, potentially much smaller, against a much better athlete is not good. So I don't know what to make of that. I'm going to pick Bravo, go out on a limb, because I just think he's much more ready to compete at this level right now. He has much less growing to do. I mean, they're both really young, but I think Bravo just his aggression and his aggressive wrestling will really make this fight work for him. But there's no reason Puelles couldn't knock him out with something silly or submit him off his back. He's got an actually pretty crafty guard game off his back. So
it's it's funny you say that. Both these guys are actually pretty small for lightweight. I think both of them competed there on The Ultimate Fighter. Are both as featherweights who went up to lightweight for The Ultimate Fighter. But if you look at the two side by side or against the same opponent or whatever, Bravo definitely looks a lot smaller than Puelles. He does not look. I'm guessing it's Puelles.
Yeah, it's probably Puelles. Yeah.
That's my best guess. I apologize to any Spanish speakers, but I think Puelles looks like a guy that more people would expect to be ready for the UFC. Honestly, because he's athletic, obviously. And he looks very controlled and technical. He has like a classic southpaw kickboxing game where it's like good straight left, good left body kick, sometimes pressure, sometimes pull back. Everything looks very poised. But I think that is maybe a problem for him because I don't think he does very well when he's pressured. I don't think he has a lot of layers to his game.
He runs backwards with his hands up, in fact, and does not return fire.
Right, and he tends to wait on the fence a lot, just kind of waits for his opponent to get uncomfortable looking at him and back off and let him out. Bravo is more ready for this level of competition by virtue of his mentality. He looks like a more experienced fighter, even if he doesn't always look as pretty as Puelles with his technique. He's grimy. He can scrap. He can take the fight anywhere. He's got a really nice jab, which is always a good thing to see from a prospect. He works behind a great jab, throws it to the body and the head, sets up counters, leads his way in with it. Very diverse, well-rounded. So, yeah, I'm also going to go with Bravo. To me, this one feels pretty hard to pick. It feels pretty tight, but I'm going to say Bravo just because I think he's scrappier. I think he can put his stamp on a fight in a way that I'm not sure Puelles can yet.
Yeah. He's also a very comfortable combination puncher. He's not good defensively. Like, he will lead with his face, but he's confident enough in his chin, which has served him well so far. And Puelles is not a great boxer at all, like a consistent boxer at all.
He's good when you're waiting on the end of his reach and he can pick you apart. But
mostly he defaults to a kicking game 9 times out of 10. Like, he just will start there and stay there. But Bravo, he's confident enough in his chin that he'll wade in behind a jab and throw hands, and he will.
He reminds me on the feet of a slightly better version of Brandon Moreno.
Yeah,
who just beat Luis Smolka. He's just got that kind of wiliness to him.
Well, they all fight out of that same Entram gym camp. Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. They're teammates. Well, there you go.
Yep. Bravo, Moreno, Akbar Areola, like Briones, all these dudes, like half the Mexican dudes that have fought in the UFC fight out of Entram Gym.
That might turn into a really solid training camp. That's a pretty good roster of regional guys right there.
Yeah, it's actually kind of. I was looking at it for doing a welcome to the UFC piece for these guys, and it's just like, man, all these dudes fight out of this gym. So
nice.
Odds on this fight, let's see. Beltran is the slight underdog, plus 108 to minus 115. Oh, wait, no. Wrong Beltran. Where are there odds for this fight? There might just not be any odds for this fight.
Claudio Puelles and Martin Bravo?
Yeah, I was looking at I thought Beltran instead of Bravo because oh, there we are. There it is. Never mind. My white xenophobia kicked in. I was like, there's a Latin name. That must be the man. Okay. You
got to be really uncomfortable looking at the betting odds for this card. Not a lot of comfortable white names.
That's right. Where are all the blue collar boys? Those hard nosed grinders. Come on. Martin Bravo minus 102 to minus 125. Claudio Puelles. I'm probably just going like even further off wrong as I say this more. Puelles, I don't know. Claudio Puelles is minus 105 to minus 115. So they're basically dead even. I am totally fine with that.
No problem.
you've got a better, more powerful athlete who's more particularly technical in his strengths against a guy who's just more aggressive and more willing to take the fight anywhere and better about controlling the fight. So, tough fight to pick. That brings us to a featherweight bout: Ricardo, Lamas, Charles Oliveira.
Oh, I keep yawning, Zan. I need to go back to that pizzeria bathroom. This is a very tough fight to call. We have the guy who can only be counted on to surprise you in Ricardo Lamas against the guy who can very often be counted on to disappoint you in Charles Oliveira. Oliveira is a madman. I don't think there is any defense to his game whatsoever. The more I watch Charles Oliveira, everything he does is about finishing his opponent.
Maybe he's secretly Korean.
Could be. He's got that kind of style. Like, everything is defense, or everything is offense. He's just coming after you no matter where the fight is. It makes him super dangerous, but also, like, for a submission specialist, I'm pretty sure he's been submitted.
We lost Connor. It has to happen once every show. Talking about Charles Oliveira versus Ricardo Lamas. There he is. He's right back.
Hello. For a submission specialist, I'm pretty sure he's been submitted twice in the UFC. Not a great look, I think, by
Jim Miller.
And,
the other one was Anthony
Donald
Pettis.
Cerrone or someone?
No, Anthony Pettis.
Anthony
Pettis.
Last fight. Right. And then gets knocked out. And I've said this for a long time. I'm always trying to think of a good, a diplomatic way to say it. But Charles Oliveira doesn't have a lot of heart. I just don't think he does. I think maybe even his aggression is kind of in his head designed to make up for the fact that he doesn't want the other guy to fight back. Because not only does he not seem particularly durable, but I have seen a lot of occasions from Charles Oliveira when he is finished where he kind of seems to give up. It seemed that way in the Cub Swanson fight. He did like a flare flop after getting hit with the right hand. It kind of seemed like he thought for a second before electing to go down, and he went from being conscious after being hit to being 100% knocked out over the course of 3 seconds, which is kind of weird. Max Holloway had an injury. I believe that he had an injury or that something felt bad, but the hospital confirmed that it wasn't really serious. Was no serious injuries found on an x-ray, so seemed to be okay from that. A lot of these times, at Nick Lentz, I bring this up all the time, but Nick Lentz is not a puncher you want to have making you look bad. And Nick Lentz hit Charles Oliveira with a right hand that put him on the verge of giving up. He turned his back, he covered up, he started wincing. It was like only because Nick Lentz was not a very good striker did Charles Oliveira regain his composure in that fight. So,
and there's the Anthony Pettis fight where he was winning parts of the stand-up of that fight, actually, and just kept going to the ground where Pettis was out-grappling him over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's so for Charles Oliveira, that's frustrating, where it doesn't seem like he's basically not ever going to be contender material, barring a streak of good luck, but he will always be a guy that if you're not a top 5 material, you're going to lose to him. And then Ricardo Lamas is in the same boat for different reasons, because if he fights somebody who's worse than him, who doesn't make a lot of mistakes, who just has a good fight, he's not going to look very good. And if you fight someone who's better than him, who makes one mistake at the right time, he's going to look really, really dangerous. So this is a guy who can barely beat Hawker and Diaz, but then also, who's his most impressive one? Let's see. Recently.
Let's see. Dennis Bermudez, Hatsu Hioki.
Sure, yeah. So he's the guy who can have a close fight with Max Holloway or beat Dennis Bermudez, and then also almost lose to Hawker and Diaz. It's a fine line with him, and it's because I don't think his whole game fits together that well in a metagame way, but he's pretty good at everything, and he has a great killer instinct. He's a very opportunistic fighter, and that makes his fight really hard to call. But I think Oliveira, being so aggressive, is probably going to give Lamas some of those openings. And if he gives Lamas openings consistently throughout the fight, that's tough. And Lamas is very difficult to finish. So I don't really see Oliveira getting him out of there quickly. So I'm going to go with Lamas by a decision. I think maybe Oliveira is going to win the first round and then start to give up these openings and not be able to pull through down the stretch.
I might actually go Lamas by KO for the similar.
Yeah.
Just because, like, that's the thing. You got to realize how incredibly tough and how strong a will Ricardo Lamas has. That, I mean, in that Holloway fight, he was getting pieced up for about 13 of 15 minutes of that fight. He got very little done. But even like down to the end, anytime Holloway was just like, oh, okay, I'm really doing well, I'll get more confident and just brawl this dude, Lamas was right there to crack him and hurt him.
Yeah, and that's the only reason I say it was close. If Max Holloway had just picked Lamas apart, it wouldn't have been that close of a fight. But the thing is, every time he hurt Lamas, Lamas made him pay. He was there and ready and willing to throw back and fight his way out. And he did it. I mean, he was never so done that Max Holloway could actually style on him.
Yeah. And that's, I think, that's exactly the dynamic here with Oliveira. It's just Oliveira is not capable of being as careful as Max Holloway. Max Holloway can outfight and point fight and pick apart for minutes on end if he needs to. Oliveira can't. Oliveira wants to rush into the clinch and try and take you down. He wants to jump on the quickest first submission he sees. He wants to throw flying knees and charge inside behind 1-2s and try and hurt you. And he leaves a lot of openings while he does it. He's good enough at it that he was, like I say, I mean, he actually hurt Anthony Pettis a few times. He actually did work against Anthony Pettis in the striking battle there. But Pettis has more problems being pushed around than Ricardo Lamas does. Mm-hmm. Like, I hate to, like, that's a weird thing to say.
Well, Lamas has a wrestling game. I mean, that's a big part of it.
That's a big part of it. Lamas has a wrestling game. And Lamas just also doesn't, he holds his ground better. He just does. Like, even if he's getting picked apart, he tends to be more, I think, ready to fire back, or like ready to respond than Pettis in ways. Like Pettis has the same, I mean, they have kind of the same particular thing of being really dangerous with the opportunities you give them, and Pettis is perhaps even more dangerous. But Lamas is...
Pettis is more dangerous, but significantly less well-rounded, I think.
Yeah. I think that's the way to put it. And I think this is just... Oliveira is going to present too much for Lamas, and at some point, Lamas, I think he could be the third person to knock Charles Oliveira out potentially here. He hits hard enough, and I think Oliveira is just going to give him too many chances. The other part of this is, though, that Oliveira can be in those moments. I think he's a significantly better transition grappler than Lamas. And if he's able to initiate scrambles with Lamas, if he's able to rush in and force Lamas on his heels and force him into scrambles, then especially early in the fight, he could submit him.
He's got one of the most dangerous submission games in the entire UFC, and no question about it.
Yeah. So this is not a Lamas should obviously win this fight. It's just, I think, over the duration, without a finish, the fight might favor Lamas, just because he's better at taking advantage of the kind of mistakes Oliveira is likely to give than Oliveira is at creating offense on his own. I would say. Mm-hmm. Maybe. It's a kind of a narrow run thing when I think about it like that, though. It's like, does Oliveira create enough offense to go with his mistakes to counter the fact that Lamas creates very little offense other than capitalizing on mistakes?
It's a tough one.
It is. The odds reflect that very well. Ricardo Lamas is the very slight underdog, plus 110 to minus 120. and Oliveira minus 104 to minus 137. There's no good way to bet on this fight, honestly. It could be a decision either way. It could be a stoppage either way. It's a great scrap. I'm glad it's happening.
If you think it's going to end super quick, under 1.5 is plus 170. Maybe.
But both dudes are, well,
Oliveira is not tough, but also like is Lamas quite good enough to find those openings? Like, is he quite a powerful enough puncher to find those? Yeah, I wouldn't bet on it.
No, it's true. So on that brings us to our co-main event: Diego Sanchez versus Marcin Held. And the biggest thing this comes down to for me is I am not picking Diego Sanchez against a top lightweight in his prime. However close to the top you think Marcin Held is, let's say a top 30 lightweight in the prime of his career, I am not picking Diego Sanchez in that fight. He could win it. He is in Nate. He is our the lightweight's Nate Marquardt, where we even said against in tandem Ricori, I was like, this is a great matchup for Nate Marquardt if I trusted Nate Marquardt, and I didn't, and he won because it was a great matchup for him.
Yeah.
This is not as good a matchup for Diego Sanchez, but Diego Sanchez has never been submitted, so it's not a terrible matchup for him.
It's pretty good. Diego Sanchez against any kind of submission specialist is pretty solid for him.
It is. It's not a bad matchup for him, but I do not trust Diego Sanchez. He did not look good at all against Jim Miller, beating Jim Miller. He did not look good against Joe Lozon getting knocked the fuck out by Joe Lozon. And he did not look good against Ricardo Lamas. And, he hasn't
been many years since he
has not looked great for many years. We've been waiting for that Joe Lozon knockout for a while now.
Yeah.
And Marcin Held keeps improving. His striking is improving. He's still a dangerous transition grappler. He's still crafty. And he just keeps getting better at all the little parts of his game. I will say his footwork is funky as shit, and he does this weird thing. I think he's looking to spin. I realized I was watching his Bellator fight. And he does this thing where, like, every 10 steps, he will cross his left leg over his right leg, and then he will pause and dip. And it's just like this janky little pause and dip. And he's looking. At one point, he eventually threw a spinning heel kick to the head of Dave Jansen, which I think is what he's looking to do off that. But every time he doesn't, it's just like you are pausing and sticking your chin out and waiting right there, asking for somebody to just clock the shit out of you with your legs crossed, and you cannot move an inch. And I mean, Diego Sanchez, I don't trust his boxing anymore to be able to take advantage of that. Like, against Jim Miller, like, his striking looked anemic. Yeah. And I don't think it's there anymore. So I'm picking Held. If Diego Sanchez can just, shut down his grappling game the whole time and stay on top of him, then he could get one of those wins where it's kind of like the all-defensive top control wrestling win. But I'm not picking that. So
the time for picking Diego Sanchez is gone. The Joe Lozon fight will be the last decent style matchup that I will pick for Diego Sanchez, because going into that, the expectation was that at the very least he could take the shots and keep going, and he doesn't have that anymore, or at the very least it's definitely in question. Joe
I always picked Lozon. I was smart enough to say, I know this is a bad style matchup, and Joe Lozon does terrible against dudes like this, but come on.
Yeah, you were smart. And Joe Lozon, he's always been a good puncher, but he's always been really good in the first round. But Diego Sanchez a few years ago probably would have been able to withstand that or do a little more to stop it from happening so dramatically. He had nothing for Joe Lozon, and it's been years and years since Diego Sanchez looked good. It's remarkable to look at his record and see that it's actually been win-loss since I don't know. Let's see. Since 2011, because it doesn't feel like he's been winning any fights in that time. And in fairness, a few of those it didn't really seem like he should have.
Somebody pointed out his last finish was Luigi Fiorvianti in 2008.
Yeah, it's been a while for Diego, and yeah, so really, like, there's some elements of the style matchup that favor him, but it's just like it's Diego Sanchez. I think he's too far gone. Marcin Held is more athletic. He's more durable. He's fresher. He just has a pep in his step that I don't think Diego will ever get back. No matter how many mean faces he makes or how many robotic punches he decides to throw, I don't think he'll ever have that natural fighting ability back again. So I have to go with Marcin Held as well.
All right. Odds on that fight, Held is the favorite -250 to -275. And Sanchez +236 to +190. And that brings us to the main event, Rafael dos Anjos versus Tony Ferguson.
Tough fight to call. It is really, really tough. It would have been tough even if Dos Anjos had not lost to Eddie Alvarez, was still holding his title, and Ferguson was a challenger, because I don't really know I don't know who will get to have their way in this fight. The big question in this fight, I think, is who gets to decide what direction the battle moves in and what the location of that battle is. Both of these guys like to have their opponents back to the fence if they can. They like to come after people and swarm them with a volume of strikes. They like to keep the pressure on. I think Dos Anjos' success is more tied to that than Ferguson's. Ferguson's pretty good if you're running after him recklessly from long range with his strikes, but he's also not quite as good with his pressure because he gets hit a lot more than Dos Anjos. He's very open. There are so many aspects. Ferguson is a really scary kind of fighter to be fighting, because there are so many aspects of his game where you say, yeah, there's a vulnerability here, there's a vulnerability here. But it's like when I pointed out in an article all the weaknesses in Sergey Kovalev's game before he fought Jean Pascal, and Pascal found all the openings and got knocked the fuck out. You know what I mean? Like, that's a scary thing. Like, you look at Tony Ferguson and you're like, there's all these openings. You can attack all these things. Here are his bad habits. But he's too tough, and he has too much stamina for those things to actually become a problem. So his opponent can fight really well and still get overwhelmed.
It's happened a few times, in fact.
Yeah, it's tough. It's very tough to fight Tony Ferguson. I think I'm going to pick Rafael dos Anjos here, because I do think that Ferguson will be more willing to give up the pressure style. And I think Dos Anjos has more tools in his toolkit that will allow him to make that style work. I think wrestling in particular, he's not a great wrestler at range, and Ferguson's not super easy to take down. But if Dos Anjos can just clinch up and put Ferguson against the fence, I have a feeling that he will be better in that kind of area. And I think the best thing to do for Tony Ferguson is to stall him out, is to make him fight in one phase for an extended period of time. So whether that means holding him on his back, holding him against the fence, or even just striking with him at range if Dos Anjos feels comfortable, and not allowing him to change distances and go crazy with his creative striking, those are things that I think would allow Dos Anjos to win. Big question mark, though, man. It's tough. Dos Anjos was just finished by Eddie Alvarez. Granted, a more powerful puncher than most give him credit for, but Tony Ferguson is just such a maniac that you could definitely see him overwhelming Dos Anjos. And then you have the fact that both guys have been training at elevation, but it's still in Mexico City. So how will the pace affect them? I have a very strong suspicion that Tony Ferguson cannot keep up his manic pace for more than 2.5 rounds.
The other interesting part of this is both guys have split from their camps.
Right, yeah. Dos Anjos is not working directly with Cordero. And what is Ferguson doing?
Ferguson has built himself a private camp at his house up in the mountains.
And at Big Bear?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting too. But it's yeah, I mean, and also, by the way, having a knockout loss to Eddie Alvarez, I'm not sure if that looks as bad as just about getting knocked out by Lando Venata. The guy who is good, but really like had not proven himself at all.
Well, part of that too, though, you could say is the idea of fighting somebody on super short notice. I believe that fight was,
yeah,
who has such an unusual style that you would not have prepared for at all. Like, I think that's the big thing is Lando Venata is very, very few fighters fight like him. And so if you haven't prepared for this guy, if you have never watched tape on him, you have never seen him, you've never thought about him, and he steps in the cage, hands down, dancing around, looking at you, and you just come after him like, okay, well, I'll just charge in and, 1-2 this guy and go home. And suddenly he's slipping punches and countering and spinning, and you're like, oh shit, what is this? I mean, like, I think there's a big surprise factor there that should be taken into account with a fight like that. And he still won it.
Yeah, he did. And not because he looked good either. Like, he won it because of that fallback that I talked about, where you just can't hurt him enough or tire him out enough. And if you do hurt him, you're fighting at his pace, and you can't keep it up. Now, the crazy Tony Ferguson has not been around that long. He's had like his Dong Hyun Kim transformation, where he's just decided, just whatever, I'm just going to run after everybody, just going nuts because I know they can't beat my pace or my chin. But it hasn't gone past like 2.5, or it hasn't gone past 1.5 rounds really at that kind of crazy pace. The last 2 fights are the most marked examples of that style that we now kind of associate with Tony Ferguson.
Well, the Josh Thompson fight was insane. Like, that was where he was like rolling and like throwing smoke bombs and throwing stars. And
yeah, it was pretty crazy too. But it hasn't been around for long. I'm really curious to know how it works at elevation with air pollution against another opponent who I think fights at a more measured pace, but is also known for pushing that pace. Is also known for not tiring and for keeping a steady work rate for 5 rounds straight. So
this to me is the point where we finally say, does Tony Ferguson's style win him a title? This is where we answer that question.
Yeah.
Because it's a style that is riddled with holes. You know, like Josh Thompson had a lot of success against Tony Ferguson. It's just that he couldn't have enough of it. He could not, when he would jump on Ferguson and land all these shots, he ended up getting so exhausted that it was just impossible.
Every single person in Tony Ferguson's last 3 fights have had great success against him. Edson Barboza was picking him apart. Lando Venata just about knocked him out. And Josh Thompson was hitting him with a good amount of volume. Nobody can keep it up compared to the pace Ferguson pushes. That's the thing. Yep.
And RDA probably can. Probably.
That's my feeling as well.
Can keep it up. Camp change is a concern, but he also has spent enough time at King's MMA that you kind of wonder, like, has he ingrained enough of that style that not being in there anymore is not going to be a major problem for him?
Yeah, I would think so. And also, it's at a certain point as MMA fans, we're not going to be nervous about people starting their own camps, because that's what top boxers do. Is they're like, these are the trainers that I work really well with. As long as Dos Anjos, and I think he's a very humble, genuine sort of guy, as long as he's still like listening to his trainers and not getting sort of a big head and thinking that nobody can beat him. Personally, if someone's in this fight is going to feel that way, it's going to be Tony Ferguson. I think Tony Ferguson is the guy who thinks that he's unstoppable, possibly even more so after that Venata fight, which, by the way, he said, I don't know if you heard this, but after the fight, he said that he slipped. But that's what was happening when he was reeling around the cage. He said he slipped when Venata kicked him.
All those banana peels. I mean, they just got to clean up those things, you know?
I can't believe it. I'm like, you were hurt for like 2 minutes straight, man. He slipped, and it really, really upset him, so he just couldn't regain his balance. But that's Tony Ferguson. Dos Anjos, I think, is more likely to start his own camp and not start going astray and ingraining all the lessons he knows. He's a disciplined guy, and I don't know about Tony Ferguson.
Yeah, it's interesting. But, Tony Ferguson is like super likely to just ninja roll, throw a smoke bomb, and then wheel kick RDA, and you'll just be like, well, shit, I don't know. guess Tony Ferguson wins.
Tony Ferguson could totally beat Eddie Alvarez. Like he could totally. Tony Ferguson's a guy who will very likely march his way to a title and then never be able to really keep it. You know what I mean?
He'll lose the next defense, and then he'll be like suddenly out of the title picture entirely, and you'll be like, wait, how did this happen?
Yeah.
I mean,
somebody's got to figure something out with Tony Ferguson, but at the moment it's like
partially too, it's worth noting he's 32 is not necessarily that old, but Ferguson's been around for 8 years now, so he's not, this is kind of I don't expect him to be able to fight like that for that much longer.
Granted, Dos Anjos has been around since 2004.
Yeah, but that's never try to measure, never measure MMA longevity by freaks. Like
people who suddenly become champions, like in the twilight years of their career.
Robbie Lawler, RDA, people like that. It's just like, I have no clue how you made this happen, but whatever, fine. And Ferguson, I mean, he fights in a way that just seems like it's not made for longevity.
It's not a sustainable style.
No. I am going with RDA here as well, but man, have I got a sinking feeling that Ferguson's going to win this. Like,
it wouldn't be bad, like as a fight fan, to have Ferguson win and go to the title. Ferguson is so fun to watch.
He is. He's super fun to watch. I'd love to see him in a title fight.
Is his style really exciting and crazy and eclectic? I also figured out that he has the highest finishing rate of the lightweight top 10 by a pretty good margin. I think he's at 72% and super well-rounded. 9 knockouts, 9 submissions. Tony Ferguson is just a whirlwind of crazy shit, and how can you not love that going forward? I'm a big fan of RDA, so I would feel a little sad for him if he lost, but
I feel like great. Ferguson or RDA can shut down the submission threat well enough.
Yes.
That this can stay a crazy striking battle where Ferguson's lack of consistency will cost him against RDA's pressure.
Yeah, I don't see like the Darce being a saving grace for him against RDA. It's very difficult. I've never seen anybody just effortlessly out-grapple Donald Cerrone the way RDA did.
Yeah.
Or Anthony Pettis or Nate Diaz, even with an injury. Yeah. There is nobody who has ever made Rafael dos Anjos look like a lackluster grappler other than Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I think that's more a style matchup thing than it was just because, I might, if they went into a submission grappling match, I might still pick RDA.
Yeah.
So
it's a good fight, and I would not be at all sad or surprised if Ferguson wins it. But I have this feeling he just might. But I'm going with my head here. I'm making the head pick, picking RDA because his style seems much more sustainable, and at altitude, yeah, especially Ferguson's style, like he may just wear himself the fuck out.
It might last just a round at Mexico City. I don't care if he is training at altitude. Like his style is an insane type of fight to bring to Mexico City.
Like we saw Yair Rodriguez, who actually like that's kind of the most as close as I can get to thinking of Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
And obviously their bases are very different, but it's the same kind of pace and things that they're throwing and putting together. And his fight in Mexico City, like he threw up by the end of it. Like
which fight was that? Which fight did he have in Mexico City?
It was his debut, I believe. Let's see. He fought.
Looks like Charles Rosa.
Charles Rosa. So his second UFC fight. And it was a split decision. And he threw up at the end of that fight. Like he had to get a bucket and throw up like with the mic in his face.
Yeah, or Cain Velasquez or Gilbert Melendez. Like how many fighters have we seen that are known for pushing a pace that could not do it in a really dramatic way in Mexico City?
Yeah. So I feel like that may be a major knock too here for Ferguson. If he can't get an early finish, then he may end up fading under RDA's pressure. Odds on this fight. Ferguson is the underdog, plus 130 down to plus 110. RDA, the favorite, minus 137 to minus 155. Do you think Ferguson is worth an underdog bet there?
God damn, man. This is just this is like an unbettable card. I don't know. All the odds are pretty good.
Yeah.
They make sense. And because I favor RDA, how can I then place an underdog bet on Ferguson at anything around plus 130? It's just not enough value.
It is. It's true. What about fight? Let's see. Fight won't start round 4 at plus 114.
That's a decent bet. I think that's a decent one.
Yeah.
Just because of the location and everything. You know, I think RDA, if he wins, I think it may be a late finish. So
there may be something to get in there on a prop bet for time.
Maybe, yeah.
Anyway,
tough though, man. This card, I mean, it's a well-matched card. That's why I like it.
It is a well-matched card. Even the fights that are blowouts on the odds, the Grasso, Heather Clark, Avila Barzola fights, those, Barzola and Grasso still have a lot to prove.
Yeah, and they also make sense. Like Barzola, most people feel like he got robbed in his fight with Bokniak. Avila isn't really good for anything else right now, so instead of cutting him, let's just get Barzola back on track. We can have a Peruvian fighter. And then for Grasso, like, she's making her debut. It's in Mexico City. Give her someone that she'll almost certainly beat. It makes sense.
And Heather Clark's a tough vet. Like,
give her someone who will make her work.
Yeah, it's somebody that'll make Grasso work, that'll force a fight out of her, and let her show what she can do.
But, without really threatening her.
Yeah, without really threatening her. Very true. So even the wide fights are not, like, they still hold pretty well. And, yeah, all the rest of the odds are super close, very close matchups, very interesting fights. So we don't have a lot of extra advice for you. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneTime. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. If you are watching this on MMANation.com on YouTube, subscribe to that channel. That's where you find all the rest of our videos. That's, all our shows, interviews, analysis, all that. Give us a like over on YouTube as well. It's a thumbs up. That helps us out a ton.
You can also find me at the Donato's in the bathroom under the hand dryers.
Yep. Come find Connor at your local pizzeria. Please carry him home, or get a wheelbarrow to help carry him home if you do not have 5 friends. And
watch it, Zane. Careful there. I'm on a diet,
Pizza and bathrooms.
I just eat the cheese. It's fine.
Okay. And yeah. Otherwise, stick around for all our other shows coming at you. We'll have I'll be flying solo, I believe, on the 6th-round post-fight show, unless you are interested in doing it with me.
I don't think I'll be around this weekend, unfortunately.
So never mind on that. I'll be flying solo on the 6th round, but we'll be back with Knuckle Up, Care Don't Care, If I Did It, all that good stuff next week. We'll be getting ready for UFC 205, and damn, that'll be a lot. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.